We can't narrow a window to hours or even a day or two, but we can tell you that based on the state of her body, that is very consistent with the death that occurred 10 months ago.
Tucked away in the rolling farmlands of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, lies a small picturesque village called Bird in Hand. It's a place where time feels like it has paused, where horse-drawn buggies clip-clop down narrow country roads. Fields stretch out in neat symmetrical rows, ploughed not by machines but by teams of horses. In Bird in Hand, the pace of life is a little slower, more deliberate, and deeply rooted in tradition. This quiet town is home to one of the most well-known Amish communities in the United States. The Amish here live much as their ancestors did, guided by a strict interpretation of Christian doctrine and a desire to remain separate from the modern world. Electricity, cars, and even zippers are shunned. Instead, Amish families in Bird in Hand rely on gas lamps, wood stoves, and simple handmade garments. The ordnung, which is a set of unwritten but strictly followed rules, governs every aspect of their lives, from the clothes they wear to how they worship. Faith, humility, and community are the cornerstone of Amish life. They believe in living simply, avoiding pride and vanity, and putting the needs of the group above the individual. Most speak Pennsylvanian Dutch at home, a dialect of German, and gather each Sunday in each other's homes for worship services that can go on for hours. Education ends after the 8th grade, and from there children are expected to learn through doing, helping on the farm, in the home, or within the family business. Bird in Hand itself is more than just a postcard-perfect town. It's a close-knit community where pretty much everybody knows one another. Many families have lived on the same land for generations, passing down not only property but values, customs, and a way of life that has remained largely unchanged for over 300 years. It's a place where doors are rarely locked, where trust runs deep, and where crime is almost unheard of. But even in a place as peaceful as Bird in Hand, darkness can still find a way in. And when it does, it shakes this quiet world to its very core. Living among the carefully tended farms and winding country lanes of Bird in Hand was 18-year-old Linda Stoltzfoos. She lived with her parents and 8 siblings in a modest farmhouse on Beachdale Road, a narrow stretch of land that winds through the heart of Amish country. The Stoltzfoos home, like so many others in the area, was set back from the road, surrounded by neat fields. A horse-drawn buggy was almost always parked in the driveway. The Stoltzfoos family belonged to the Old Order Amish, a more conservative sect within the already traditional Amish community. For the Old Order, life is centred on humility, discipline, and detachment from the outside world. They don't use electricity from the grid, and they avoid personal cars. Cell phones, televisions, and computers are unheard of, but it's not out of fear or distrust of technology itself. For the Amish, the concern is deeper. It's about preserving community and preventing individualism from unravelling the close-knit social fabric that binds their world together. The idea is simple but profound. Technology, if it promotes vanity, laziness, or excessive interaction with the outside world, it's better left untouched. And Linda embodied the values of her community with grace. She lived a simple, purposeful life. She was a soft-spoken young woman who was deeply devoted to her family and her faith. She often rose before sunrise to help with the household chores or with her younger siblings. Her days always followed the quiet rhythms of Amish life. Cooking, sewing, reading scripture, and preparing meals from scratch. But Linda also had a giving heart, one that extended far beyond her own home. She volunteered her time tutoring children who struggled with learning disorders. She had a gentle way with people, especially with the young and the vulnerable. Those who knew Linda said that she had a calming presence, someone who listened more than she spoke, somebody who never raised her voice. When she wasn't tutoring, Linda worked part-time at a local produce market not far from her home. She was always polite, always composed, never in a rush. And Linda didn't have many friends outside of the Amish community. In fact, she had never had a boyfriend. That wasn't unusual for a young woman her age and bird in hand, where courtship was often slow and carefully considered, sometimes taking place during church gatherings. She was active in her church and her youth group. Friends described Linda as obedient and modest, somebody who always followed the rules, someone who would never take unnecessary risks or draw unwanted attention. There was a deep-rooted history to the Stoltzfoos name in Lancaster County. Linda was a descendant of Christian Stoltzfoos, a man who immigrated from Germany in the 1700s and helped to establish the Amish settlements that still exist today. The legacy was strong. Generations of farmers, craftsmen, and homemakers who had held fast to their beliefs in the face of a changing world. Linda was a part of that legacy, and she embraced it fully. The sun rose over the fields of bird in hand on the 21st of June 2020. It was a regular Sunday like so many others in the quiet Amish town. Inside the Stoltzfoos home on Beachdale Road, Linda began her morning routine. She cleaned herself up and then dressed in her usual attire. A simple tan dress, a white apron tied carefully at the waist, and a crisp white cape over her shoulders. Her hair, which was always neatly parted in the middle and twisted into a bun, was hidden beneath her prayer covering. After a quiet breakfast with her family, Linda stepped outside. Sunday in the Amish community isn't just a day of rest. It's sacred. It's a time for reflection, for scripture, for togetherness. Every other Sunday, Amish families take turns hosting church services in their homes. On this day, the service was being held in a farmhouse along Stumptown Road, just under 2 miles away. It was a familiar walk for Linda. It was peaceful and scenic, with sprawling fields of corn and wildflowers on either side and the occasional buggy rattling past. Linda arrived for the service, which, like all Amish worship, was long and traditional, conducted in Pennsylvanian Dutch with men and women seated separately on backless wooden benches. After the hymns and prayers, a communal meal followed. Lillian Ebersole, who was a friend of Linda's, remembered that they stayed behind to help with the clean-up, quietly washing dishes and chatting in the kitchen, as they had done many times before. Once the dishes were done, the two girls stepped outside and stood near the barn. Linda mentioned that she was heading home to change into more comfortable clothing and grab the dessert she had baked the night before. She wanted to bring it along to youth group. She'd been looking forward to it. Youth group ran from 2 p.m. until late into the night, sometimes until 11 p.m, offering a rare space for young Amish people to socialise, sing and share food under supervision. Lillian watched as Linda set off barefoot, with her shoes in her hand, something which was a common practice among the Amish, especially on warmer days. Linda appeared to be in good spirits. There was no indication, none at all, that anything was wrong. She didn't mention stopping anywhere on her way home. She simply said goodbye and walked away. That was the last time anybody ever saw Linda. Hours passed. The afternoon slipped into evening, and the Stoltzfoos family sat down to dinner without Linda. It was expected. After all, youth group often ran late into the night. Still, when 11 p.m. came and went and there was still no sign of her, her parents became concerned. Her father, Lloyd, went into her bedroom. It was empty. Her church clothing was nowhere to be found. The dessert still sat in the kitchen. He knew then, without a doubt, that Linda had never made it back home after church. But he knew her routine. He knew she liked to change out of her church clothing before youth group. Without waiting, Lloyd stepped out into the darkness and began retracing his daughter's route. With his flashlight in his hand, he walked the quiet rural roads, calling out his daughter's name into the night. The sky was black, the fields silent. There was no sign of Linda. No movement in the hedgerows, no flicker of her white cape in the moonlight. He reached out to her friends. One by one, they confirmed what he had already feared. Linda had been at church that morning, but she never arrived at youth group. Some assumed she'd fallen ill and stayed home. It hadn't seemed suspicious at the time, but now it was clear something was wrong. At around 2:30 a.m, Lloyd made contact with the police to report his daughter missing. Officer Nathan Westerman responded to the family's home. Lloyd explained that Linda had left church around 12:30 p.m. to walk back home, that she was supposed to go to youth group, that she never showed, that her usual clothing was missing. The search began in those early morning hours as Westerman and his team moved quietly to canvass the area. They spoke to neighbours, family members and fellow churchgoers. Lillian Ebersole told them that she and Linda had lingered after the service to do the dishes. She said they chatted and that Linda had walked away barefoot, heading home as she always did. She'd seemed perfectly fine, normal, happy. But somewhere along that familiar, well-trodden path, between Stumptown Road and Beachdale, Linda vanished. By sunrise the next morning, the rolling farmland of Bird in Hand was transformed into a search grid. Word had spread like wildfire. One of their own was missing. And in the Amish community, where everyone knows each other and the pace of life is slow and intentional, a disappearance like this felt almost unimaginable. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The Amish, the Mennonites, and even those outside of the plain communities gathered in droves, united by a single mission to find Linda. The narrow roads around Stumptown and Beachdale swelled with volunteers. The searchers walked in lines through the endless rows of corn, their voices calling out Linda's name again and again. The terrain was vast and varied. Fields stretched on for miles, dotted with patches of thick brush and small winding streams. Every waterway and hedgerow was checked. They scoured barns, sheds and overgrown trails. Nothing was too remote and nothing was overlooked. As the day wore on, law enforcement escalated their efforts. Police closed off stretches of road in Upper Leacock Township. By 6:30 p.m, 15 horseback riders were dispatched to reach areas that were too difficult to access on foot. Tracking dogs were then brought in, noses low to the ground, sniffing through grass and gravel, looking for the faintest trace. But as the sun dipped low in the sky, no sign of Linda had surfaced. Not a scrap of clothing, not a footprint. Nothing that could indicate where she had gone. At around 8 p.m, the community gathered once more, not to search but to pray. A vigil was held along North Ronks Road, the same road that Linda would have walked. One man stood to speak and said, "You know what is going on. Today we declare you're good and you're God." Another looked out at the horizon where the sun was setting in vibrant streaks of crimson and gold, and quietly said that it was a sign from God. Meanwhile, Linda's family set up a Facebook page to coordinate efforts and share updates. They encouraged compassion and calm, welcoming thoughts and prayer, but asked people to avoid speculation. Their pain was raw, and the rumours only made it worse. From the very beginning, the theory was grim. Something bad had happened to Linda. She hadn't simply wandered off. People in the Amish community sometimes do leave. They might feel pulled by the outside world, by freedom, technology, romance, but those departures aren't usually silent. There are often signs, but Linda had shown none of them. She didn't have a cell phone, no computer, no boyfriend. She didn't even have friends outside of the Amish community, and she had no secret life, at least none that anybody knew of. Her world was small by design, but it was one that made her deeply happy. One family friend said, "She was a sweet, quiet girl who never put herself in a troublesome situation. We're shocked. Her even leaving without informing anybody where she was going is out of character. This is all out of character." The police agreed. Officer Matt Hess addressed the public stating, "She didn't indicate to anybody that she wanted to go and take a trip, so it's very out of character for Linda to do this. So it changed the circumstances in the sense that there was no pre-planned events or reasons for her not to come back home." By the next day, the FBI had joined the search. Whatever had happened to Linda, it was no longer just a local mystery. It had become something much bigger and much darker. The days passed achingly slow for Linda's family. Each morning brought new hope, and each night new dread. A week had slipped by, and still there was no sign of Linda. Tips came in steadily. People thought that they'd seen Linda, or maybe a car that didn't belong in that part of town. Investigators followed every lead with urgency, but each one only led to the same place, a dead end. In the second week of the investigation, detectives shifted focus. They released a request to the public. If you were in the area of Mill Creek Road, Stumptown, Gibbons, Beachdale, or Mill Creek Roads on the day that Linda disappeared, sometime between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., they needed to hear from you. The goal was to narrow down Linda's movements, to find somebody who may have seen something, anything, that could break the case open. Meanwhile, the emotional toll on the community deepened. Each night people gathered to pray, and it wasn't just the Amish. Mennonite families and even those without faith showed up with candles and heavy hearts. Linda's uncle Merv Fisher put it best when he said, "It's more than I've seen in my 40 years. It's brought the outside English and Mennonite and Amish communities together in a way I've never seen." As part of the evolving investigation, the FBI created a composite image showing what Linda might look like with her hair down and dressed in modern clothing. It was a heartbreaking glimpse into another version of Linda, one her community had never seen, but one the outside world might recognise. To generate more leads, the FBI offered a $10,000 reward, not just for information leading to Linda's recovery, but for any information that could lead to the arrest and conviction of the person responsible. Because by now they were certain Linda had been abducted. And then a tip came in. Isaac Ash, a local man who lived on Stumptown Road, recalled something odd. Around 12:30 p.m., just after Linda would have left the church, he was sitting on his front porch when a red sedan passed by, heading east. The car had come from the direction of the church. Then strangely it turned around at Red Lane. The car paused, just for a moment, before heading back the way it came, now driving west back towards the church. Isaac described the driver as a white man with dark hair, but he noticed that the man's skin was darker in tone. He was maybe Hispanic, he thought. The driver's behaviour was odd, Isaac thought. The way he turned around, like he'd seen something or someone. Could he have spotted Linda walking alone? Investigators thought so. Then came another sighting, this time on Amish Road in Gap, around 1 p.m. on the day that Linda vanished. Sarah and Isaac Stoltzfoos were walking together when they noticed a red car driving north. On the passenger side was a young Amish woman. She was wearing a white apron and a black head covering, traditional church attire. Sarah instinctively waved, as was custom, but the woman didn't wave back. Instead, she looked at Sarah. Her expression haunted her. "She looked at me with pleading eyes," Sarah recalled. At the time, she thought that it was strange. After seeing photographs of Linda, she was convinced that the woman in the car was her. Other members of the Amish community came forward with similar sightings. A red car, an Amish girl, a man, white or possibly Hispanic, behind the wheel. The girl always in church clothing, and always something felt off. The detail that bothered many was that it was highly unusual to see an Amish woman in a car while dressed in her Sunday best. Something about it felt wrong. Detectives combed through surveillance footage from the area, and at 1 p.m. they found it. They saw a red sedan driving south on Beachdale Road, coming from the direction of Stumptown. The footage was grainy, but when the FBI enhanced it, they noticed something chilling. A pale object in the front passenger seat. It was shaped like a person. Detectives believed that it was Linda. They analysed every single frame. The vehicle was identified as a second-generation Kia Rio. It had a distinctive spoiler and several stickers on the truck. It was the brake that they needed. When they ran the license plate, the search led to a man, Justo Smoker. Justo Smoker was a 34-year-old Hispanic man with black hair, a moustache and a beard. His early years had been marked by tragedy. As a child, he was found on the streets of Costa Rica. His biological parents would leave him and his brother alone for weeks at a time. The young boys often stole food as a means to survive. He was placed in an orphanage where he suffered horrific abuse, both physical and sexual. While there, his biological mother died. Eventually, he and his brother were adopted by a couple in the United States in hopes of a new beginning. At first, it seemed like he might overcome his traumatic start. Smoker excelled at wrestling in high school. He earned a 3.0 GPA and even secured a spot on the Lancaster Lebanon Wrestling All-Stars team in 2003. But the promise didn't last. By 2005, he had turned to a life of crime. In 2006, he and his brother Victor went on a violent spree, committing a string of armed robberies using a BB gun to hold up 4 different businesses. Smoker was sentenced to 12.5 to 30 years in prison. During the trial, his attorney spoke of his troubled childhood and the abuse he endured. Smoker himself said to the judge, "They raised me better than this. I'm sorry for what I did and the people I hurt, including my family." His adoptive father was less forgiving. He said that Smoker had been trouble from the very start. After serving nearly the minimum of his sentence, Smoker was released on February 28, 2019. But freedom brought no redemption. Smoker struggled to stay sober. His sister died shortly after he was released, sending him into a spiral. He drank heavily, sometimes to the point of blacking out, waking up at home with no memory of how he'd gotten there. It was in this fractured state of existence that Smoker came onto law enforcement's radar. After identifying the red Kia Rio in the surveillance footage, detectives tracked the vehicle to Dutchland Incorporated, a business in Gap, Pennsylvania, where Smoker worked. In the parking lot, they observed the car closely. It matched the description exactly. A second-generation Kia Rio, missing its front passenger hubcab, with visible damage to the passenger side panel. But they didn't have enough evidence for a search warrant, so they watched. When Smoker left work, detectives followed. He drove north on SR 41, then west onto Lincoln Highway, pulling briefly into the parking lot of a bird-in-hand window showroom. Then he headed towards a cluster of apartments near 3250 Lincoln Highway. Detectives learned that this was where he lived. The next day, they knocked on his door. Smoker let them in. He said he didn't know anybody named Linda. He claimed he hadn't been anywhere near Beachdale Road the day she vanished. But detectives knew that he was lying. They had surveillance footage that placed him on Beachdale Road, the very area Linda was last seen around the same time she vanished. But with no body, no physical evidence, and only a vague sighting from grainy footage, they couldn't arrest him. So they kept digging. Soon they came across some new evidence. Footage from a resident named Scott Bokian who lived along Beachdale Road. The video was time-stamped, 12:36 p.m. It showed Smoker's red Kia turning off Beachdale Road and pulling to the west side, just out of camera view. Minutes earlier, at 12:30 p.m, a woman who was believed to be Linda was captured walking south on Beachdale Road. Then another figure entered the frame. It was a man, and detectives believed it was Justo Smoker. He walked directly towards Linda. Then there was movement, sudden and quick. It looked as though he placed something over her head and grabbed her. The two figures then moved off camera towards the west side of the road, right where Smoker's vehicle had just parked. Moments later, the Kia Rio was seen driving away. While the footage was blurry, there was a pale shape in the passenger seat. Something white. It was Linda. Detectives continued to investigate Justo Smoker as a person of interest in Linda's disappearance. Their minds turned back to a tip they had received just 2 days after she vanished. A report of a suspicious red vehicle parked behind a business at 3104 Harvest Drive in Ronks. It was a red Kia, and it had the same license plate as Justo Smoker's car. According to the tipster, a Hispanic male had exited the car, looked into the building's windows and doors, and then drove off. But he wasn't gone for long. He came back. This time he backed the Kia into a space beside the railroad tracks that bordered a wooded area. It was secluded, isolated, the perfect place to hide something, or someone. Detectives now believe that Justo Smoker had returned to Harvest Drive to dispose of Linda's body. They launched a search of the area, sealing it off with crime scene tape and beginning a slow, methodical sweep of the woods behind the building. It didn't take long before they spotted something. About 40 yards into the trees, they noticed disturbed soil, hidden in the thick vegetation as though somebody had tried to camouflage it. Carefully, they began to dig. Just 6 to 8 inches beneath the surface, detectives unearthed women's clothing. A white bra and a pair of dark-coloured foot stockings knotted together. Linda's family confirmed the items likely belonged to her. The bra was her size and style. As for the stockings, Linda had a habit of tying them together and carrying them barefoot as she walked home. Not far from the makeshift burial site, 2 logs had been arranged in a V shape. When detectives rolled them over, they made another disturbing discovery: a white plastic zip tie that had been cut. The evidence was growing, and with it, the urgency. Detectives brought in a cadaver dog to search the area, but the dog didn't pick up any scent of human remains. Still, the presence of Linda's clothing, deliberately hidden and buried, was enough. Later that day, Justo Smoker was arrested. He was charged with felony kidnapping and misdemeanor false imprisonment. The judge ordered that he be held without bail. With Smoker in custody, detectives turned their attention to his digital footprint. They had now secured a warrant for his phone records. They found that between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. on the day that Linda disappeared, Smoker had exchanged 15 messages with his brother Victor. Text and multimedia messages, many of them sent while he was in the area where Linda had last been seen. Cell tower data also placed his phone in the vicinity of the abduction. Then it showed movement. Smoker drove into the dense, isolated Welsh mountain area, a place full of ravines, thick underbrush, and little foot traffic. After that, he headed to Harvest Drive. The evidence was pointing to a chilling conclusion. Justo Smoker hadn't been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He'd been stalking the Amish community. As the investigation continued, more Amish women came forward. They told detectives about a man in a red car, a Kia with a missing hubcap and dented roof, who had followed them as they walked along rural roads. He would slow down, circle back, linger. It appeared that Smoker had been hunting for a victim, and on that summer afternoon, he found one. Detectives now strongly believe that Linda was no longer alive. The case had shifted from a desperate search for a missing person to a recovery mission. At a press conference held alongside the FBI and Pennsylvania State Police, Lancaster County District Attorney Heather Adams confirmed the community's worst fears. She had told reporters that they had no reason to believe that Linda had entered Justo Smoker's vehicle willingly. She said that Linda had most likely suffered harm. Her words devastated the community, especially the Amish. They were peaceful, private, and law-abiding people. The Amish were known for living simple, quiet lives, largely untouched by the violence of the outside world. Now that innocence had been shattered. Lieutenant Matt Hess voiced what many were thinking when he said, "I mean, what have the Amish ever done to anyone?" Violent crime in Lancaster County's Amish population was rare, but it wasn't unheard of. Mark Luden, a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who studied the Amish, explained that while internal Amish disputes occasionally arise, violence from outsiders, who are referred to as the English, was uncommon, although not unprecedented. Most incidents involving the Amish and outsiders tend to be pranks or property crimes. Pumpkins thrown at buggies, theft, buggy vehicle accidents. But this was something far more sinister. Mark DeWald, a professor specialising in Amish education, noted that most crimes against the Amish were non-violent. Linda's disappearance and presumed murder was a dark exception. The fallout was immediate. In the quiet village of Bird in Hand, fear took root. Amish families stopped walking alone. They implemented a buddy system. Trust in the outside world, the English, was shaken. Local resident Scott Pokian put it plainly. A lot of people take advantage of the Amish from what I see. Another neighbour, Susan Stoffer, added, "It grips your heart because it's right in my neighbourhood. To think an 18-year-old girl was missing from here was very emotional. This search was just different, because it was so close to home and because of the community it hit. The Amish live a very upright life. I think a lot of them don't know what goes on in the world." But even in the face of such darkness, there was light. In a show of solidarity and love, thousands gathered for a prayer ride to honour Linda and support her grieving family. They were asked to wear her favourite colour, yellow. Cars and motorcycles adorned with yellow bandanas and flags filled the lot at Ephrata Community Church. There were people from all across the country, strangers united by sorrow, compassion and hope. A moment of silence was held before the event began. Then a 30-mile caravan wound its way through Lancaster County, ending in Bird in Hand, the very community Linda had called home. Brendan Vail, one of the organisers of the event, stood in awe. He said, "I had no idea it would grow this big at all." At the start of August, a preliminary hearing was held to determine whether there was enough evidence to send Justo Smoker to trial. His defence attorney, Christopher Tallarico, tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case. He argued that the surveillance footage showing Linda's abduction was essentially meaningless. Just pixels, he said. He insisted that there was no way to prove that the figures in the video were Linda and Smoker. But detectives had more than just pixels. Detective Christopher Jones testified that everything had pointed to one tragic conclusion. Linda was dead. There had been no activity on her bank account, and no travel records. And Linda, he pointed out, didn't even have an ID. She wouldn't have been able to use mass transit or check into a hotel. She had simply vanished. He spoke gently about Linda's life. She was nice, caring, and always wanted to know about other people, he told the court. Everybody close to her said the same thing. She was happy. She had no problems at home, no reason to run away. After the hearing, the judge ruled that Justo Smoker would stand trial. Then on the 20th of August, attention turned to the rugged wooded terrain of Welsh Mountain. Justo Smoker's cell phone data had placed him in the area after Linda's abduction, and it now became the focus of an intensive search. Hundreds of volunteers showed up. Some brought machetes to cut through the thick summer brush. The sun was brutal, temperatures in the 80s, but the community was determined. Search teams were assigned grid patterns mapped with special software. They used surveyor's tape to mark areas and log their progress in meticulous detail. Those who couldn't join the search helped in other ways. They made sandwiches, handed out bottles of water, and served hot meals at Ridgeview Mennonite Church, which had become the command centre. But after 2 full days, the forest had given up no answers. "I was hoping for today, I really was," said searcher Bill Hamburger. Even as the search dragged on, Justo Smoker made his next move. He waived his arraignment and pleaded not guilty to kidnapping and false imprisonment. Then in December, the case took another sharp turn. Smoker was officially charged with Linda's murder. More evidence against him had been uncovered to warrant the charge. His DNA had been found on Linda's stockings, the same ones buried in the woods near Harvest Drive. And cell phone records revealed something else. In the days following the abduction, Smoker had returned to that same spot multiple times. District Attorney Heather Adams announced the new charges and said, "Given the circumstances of Linda's disappearance, specifically a forceful abduction by a stranger, we always feared the worst." But the search for Linda's body was not yet over. Behind the scenes, a plea deal was being discussed. Justo Smoker agreed to lead investigators to Linda's body on one condition: the death penalty would be taken off the table. In late April, he made good on that deal. With detectives at his side, he led them to a wooded area off Route 41, land that is owned by Dutchland Incorporated, where he had once worked. Just beyond the railroad tracks, he pointed to a mound of dirt. Detectives began to dig. About 42 inches down, something shiny caught the light. It was a tarp. They carefully peeled it back, and inside they found the badly decomposed body of Linda. She was still wearing the same dress and bonnet she had on the day she vanished. Her hands and feet had been bound. Her sash and apron were wrapped tightly around her neck. A strip of duct tape stretched across her mouth from cheek to cheek. Smoker admitted that he had originally buried Linda closer to her home, near where her bra and stockings were found, but moved her after her disappearance had made the news. Linda had been strangled. She had also been stabbed in the neck while she was still alive. The wound had caused her to bleed into her esophagus. There were also injuries that were consistent with sexual assault. The pathologist said,
We can't narrow a window to hours or even a day or two, but we can tell you that based on the state of her body, that is very consistent with the death that occurred 10 months ago.
For Linda's family, it was the final confirmation of a horror they had long feared. Her uncle Mervyn said, "All of us have been hoping for closure. It's not the news we wanted. Progress is moving forward to bring Linda to rest." That afternoon, the district attorney held a press conference.
Investigators have reason to believe that Smoker originally killed Linda within hours of her kidnapping on June 21st and buried her behind the business on Harvest Drive in Ronks, where Linda's stockings and bra had previously been discovered and where Smoker's car had been seen.
On April 26th, 10 months after Linda was taken, she was finally laid to rest. 69 horse-drawn buggies formed a solemn procession to Myers Cemetery on East Eby Road, not far from where Linda had been kidnapped. A few SUVs followed behind. Police had closed the road to make way. It was a private ceremony, simple and serene, much like Linda. Amish funerals are quiet, understated affairs. There's no flowers, no eulogies, no long sermons. There's just hymns and scripture. Death is accepted as part of God's will. But that didn't make it any easier. Linda was then buried by hand, in a pine coffin made without nails. Her community, broken but together, stood silently, watching as the earth was returned to the grave. Linda Stoltzfoos was finally home. On the 23rd of July 2021, Justo Smoker stood before the court one last time. He pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, kidnapping, and several other offences. In a quiet, emotionless voice, he admitted that he had strangled Linda, first with his arm, then with his shoelaces, before stabbing her once in the neck. Although Linda's injuries were consistent with a sexual assault, Smoker denied that he had raped her. Judge David Ashworth accepted the plea. He acknowledged that it was not justice in its fullest form, but it was something. Without the plea deal, Linda's body may have never been recovered. Without it, there would be no certainty, no resolution. With it, Smoker would be held accountable, the community would be protected, and Linda's loved ones would be given a measure of peace. He looked directly at Smoker and stated, "You are a predator of the worst kind, an extreme danger to the community." Then Samuel Blank stepped forward to deliver a victim impact statement on behalf of Linda's family and the wider Amish community. He spoke with grace, but there was no mistaking the weight of grief in his voice. He said that Linda's murder had shaken their peaceful world. It had introduced fear, suspicion, and sorrow into a community where those things had never belonged. "I believe we were all Stoltzfooses that day," he said. He spoke about Linda's role as the firstborn, the one who should have been courted married, become a mother and grandmother. Those chapters of her life would now remain unwritten. Then he spoke of forgiveness. Not as a feeling, but as a choice, as something rooted in their Christian faith. He stated, "The family and the community can and will forgive you, Justo. For some it will come easy, for others it will take time and work." Linda's family had not come to court, not because they were unwilling to forgive, but because the pain was still too raw. Smoker's defense attorney Christopher Tallarico addressed the court next. He painted a portrait of a man that was broken long before the crime. He spoke of Smoker's childhood trauma, abuse, the loss of his mother and sister, and a long battle with alcoholism. He said that Smoker had been drinking heavily the weekend he abducted Linda. He had brought beer in a convenience store just before he took her. He said, "There is no logical explanation for what he did next. To this day, he wishes he could take it all back." Smoker was then given the chance to speak. He stood in silence for several seconds, his head bowed. He finally said, "I thought I would know what to say, but what words can I say other than I am sorry? To Linda's family, to the community, to my supporters, I am sorry. I robbed the family of time and memories. All I can say is I'm sorry." He called Linda a light and said that because of him, the world was now dimmer. He then turned to his adoptive father and biological brother and said, "I was raised better than this. I am better than this. I was loved better than this. I'm sorry." The judge then handed down the sentence. 35.5 to 71 years in prison. An additional 17 years were tacked on for violating his parole. Outside the courtroom, District Attorney Heather Adams called it what it was. This is, effectively, a life sentence for Smoker. Well, besties, that is it for this episode of Morbidology. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to my newest supporters up on Patreon. Phoenix, Brett, Lisa, Laura, and Whitney. Your support seriously goes such a long way, and I am eternally grateful. The link to Patreon is in the show notes if you'd like to join us up on there. In exchange for your support, I upload ad-free and early release episodes behind the scenes, and there's also a bunch of bonus episodes of Morbidology Plus that aren't on the regular podcast platforms. I'm hoping to get some more bonus episodes written and recorded over the next 6 months, but I'm still playing catch up from maternity leave. But keep your eyes peeled for those if you're up on Patreon. Morbidology is now up on YouTube. If you'd like to go and hit that subscribe button, I would be eternally grateful. Remember to check us out at morbidology.com for more information about this episode and to read some true crime articles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and have an amazing week.